They say the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, but they never tell you what happens when that apple rolls right past you, finds a nicer tree across the street, and spends 30 years pretending it grew there instead. Welcome back to Revenge Addict. Grab your snacks, get comfortable, and maybe pour yourself something with a little bit of a kick, because the people in these stories had every chance to behave themselves. They just chose wrong. And today's story is about what happens when a son confuses kindness for weakness, patience for ignorance, and a quiet father for an easy target. Hit that like button and subscribe before we dive in. Trust me, you're going to want to remember where you found this one. My name is Vincent Castellano. I am 69 years old. I live in a 2-bedroom house in Staten Island that I bought in 1987 for $82,000. The porch sags a little on the left side. The gutters whistle when the wind blows from the north, and I love every cracked tile and squeaky floorboard like they were my own children. Maybe more, honestly. At least the floorboards never asked me for a down payment on a Brooklyn apartment they couldn't afford. I retired 11 years ago from a logistics management position at a regional shipping company. That's a fancy way of saying I made sure trucks went where they were supposed to go and that the drivers got paid before their ex-wives cleaned out their checking accounts. It was not glamorous work, but it was steady, and it taught me something important. Most disasters happen because somebody got impatient. A driver rushes a turn, a dispatcher ignores a weather report, a son decides he doesn't want to wait for his inheritance. That last one is where our story really begins. My son Jordan, 37 years old, works in asset management, which I have learned is a profession where you move other people's money around and then take a slice for yourself like a deli counter employee who samples the turkey before he weighs it. Jordan is handsome in the way that expensive haircuts and tailored suits can make anyone handsome. He has his mother's jawline and her complete inability to remember my birthday. His mother, my ex-wife Denise, left me in 1999 for a dentist named Barry who drove a Mercedes and had all his original teeth. I did not fight the divorce. I gave her the house in New Jersey, the savings account, and full custody of Jordan with the understanding that I would see him every other weekend. That arrangement lasted about 8 months before Jordan decided that Barry's pool was more interesting than my apartment. I cannot blame a 12-year-old for wanting a pool. I can blame the 37-year-old who showed up at a charity gala last spring and auctioned off a dinner with his father for $1. Let me back up. The gala was at a hotel in Midtown Manhattan, the kind of place where the forks weigh more than my first car. Jordan had invited me as what he called a family gesture, but what I later understood was a prop for his public image. See, Jordan had recently been passed over for a partnership at his firm. Word on the street was that the senior partners thought he lacked emotional maturity and authentic community engagement. So Jordan decided to manufacture some authenticity by bringing his elderly father to a black-tie charity event. He told me to wear the blue suit, the one I bought for my brother's funeral. I wore it. I even polished my shoes. I'm not a fool. I knew what he was doing, but I thought maybe this time he might actually enjoy my company. That is the dangerous thing about hope. It keeps you showing up to places where you are not wanted. The gala was loud. Champagne glasses clinking, people laughing too hard at jokes that weren't funny. I stood near a window on the 52nd floor and watched the taxis crawl along Broadway like little yellow beetles. Jordan circulated through the crowd, shaking hands with both hands. You know the type. The double-handed shake means either you are deeply sincere or you are deeply calculating. Jordan was neither. He was just performing. About an hour into the evening, they started the auction. Painted trash cans from famous artists. A weekend at some senator's lake house. Dinner with a celebrity chef. Normal rich people things. Jordan had apparently donated something to the auction as well. I did not know what until I heard the auctioneer call out, lot number 47. A home-cooked Italian dinner prepared by the lovely Denise Castellano Berry and her charming son Jordan, featuring a special appearance by family patriarch Vincent. I almost choked on my sparkling water. Denise was there. Of course she was there. She had probably catered the thing herself. Barry the dentist was in the corner looking at his phone. Denise waved at me from across the room like we were old friends instead of two people who had spent a combined $30,000 on divorce lawyers. The bidding started at $500. A woman in red raised her paddle, then a man in a gray suit, then someone from the back. The price climbed to $2,000, then $5,000, then $8,000. I felt something warm in my chest. Maybe people actually wanted to have dinner with me. Maybe Jordan had been wrong about me all these years. And then Jordan stood up. He was laughing. He walked to the front of the room and took the microphone from the auctioneer. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "I love my dad, I really do, but let's be honest. He's a retired truck dispatcher from Staten Island who thinks fine dining is when the diner gives you 2 pickles instead of 1. A few people laughed nervously. Jordan continued. So I'm going to do you all a favor. I'm going to bid on my own father, $1. He pulled a dollar bill from his pocket and held it up. Going once, going twice, sold to the disrespectful son for one lousy buck. The room erupted. Some people were genuinely entertained. Most were just relieved the awkwardness was over. I stood by the window and felt 52 floors of air pressure pressing against the glass. I did not cry, I do not cry, but I did something worse, I smiled. Because in that moment I understood something that Jordan did not. He had just shown every person in that room exactly who he was, and somewhere in the back of that hotel ballroom someone was watching. His name was Marcus Thorne, 53 years old, tech billionaire, philanthropist, and the single most patient man I have ever met, which is saying something because I once waited 3 hours for a tow truck on the Belt Parkway without losing my temper. Marcus stood up from a table in the corner. He was not wearing a tuxedo like everyone else. He wore a dark gray suit that probably cost more than my house, but looked like he had slept in it. He walked to the front of the room with the easy confidence of a man who had never been told no in his adult life. He took the microphone from Jordan. He looked at my son for a long moment, then he looked at me. I'll bid $1 million, Marcus said. The room went silent. Someone dropped a fork. For the dinner with Vincent, not the family dinner, just Vincent. I want to hear about his time in logistics. Jordan's face did something complicated. It tried to be gracious and humiliated at the same time, like a man who had just realized he stepped in something expensive. The auctioneer stammered. Marcus wrote a check on the spot. And then he walked across the room, shook my hand with one hand, not two, and said, Mr. Castellano. My name is Marcus Thorne. I believe you knew a friend of mine, Daniel O'Brien, Syracuse University, class of 1978. If you have made it this far, do me a quick favor. Hit that like button and subscribe. It costs you nothing and means everything to this channel. Thank you. Now let me tell you about Danny O'Brien. Danny was my roommate sophomore year. He was from Boston, Irish kid with red hair and a laugh that sounded like rocks in a dryer. We were both studying business, both broke, both convinced we were going to be somebody someday. Danny had an idea for a software company back when software was something you bought in a box from a store. He needed $50,000 to get it off the ground. This was 1984. $50,000 was real money. It still is, but back then it was a house in some neighborhoods. Danny asked his family. They said no. He asked the bank. They laughed. He asked me. I had just started at the shipping company. I was making $22,000 a year. I had $6,000 in savings, but I had also just watched my father die of cancer in a hospital room that smelled like bleach and regret. And I remembered something he told me. Vincent, he said, you can either die with money or die with stories. The money stays here either way. So I took out a loan against my future. I borrowed $44,000 from a credit union at 11% interest. I gave Danny every penny. He cried. I told him to stop being a baby and go build something. He built it. He built a company that sold for $200 million in 1999. The same year my wife left me for the dentist. Danny tried to pay me back. He sent a check for $500,000. I sent it back. I told him to invest it. He did. And then he died, pancreatic cancer, 2015. I went to his funeral in Boston. I stood in the back. I did not tell anyone who I was. That is the kind of friend Danny had. He made so many people rich that they all assumed someone else had been there first. Marcus Thorne was Danny's business partner. They met in 1987. Marcus was a 24-year-old programmer with bad skin and a good brain. Danny was the sales guy. They built the company together. And before Danny died, he told Marcus about me. He said, there's a guy in Staten Island who gave me my start. He never took a dime. If you ever get a chance to do something for him, do it. Marcus remembered. He spent years trying to find me, but I am not easy to find. I have no social media. I have a landline. I pay my taxes in person. I am the kind of person who disappears in plain sight. Marcus finally found me through a property record search. He bought a ticket to the gala because he heard Jordan was involved in the charity. He wanted to meet me in a neutral setting, and then he watched my son auction me off for $1. Vincent, Marcus said to me after the gala over coffee in a diner on 23rd Street, Danny's fund is worth about $800 million now. I want to give you 15%, not as charity, as a belated return on investment. Danny would have wanted it. I almost choked on my coffee. 15% of $800 million is $120 million. I'm a retired truck dispatcher from Staten Island. I do my own yard work. I buy my jeans at the discount store. I do not know what to do with $120 million, but I knew what I wanted to do with my son. I told Marcus I would accept the equity on one condition. The dinner with Jordan, the one he bought for $1. I wanted to host it at my house on my terms, and I wanted Marcus there as a witness. Marcus smiled. He had the kind of smile that made you realize he had already anticipated your request and had been hoping you would make it. Done, he said. But Vincent, one more thing, don't tell Jordan about the money, not yet. Let him think you're still the boring dad from the auction. Let him think he won. I agreed, because Marcus understood something that I was just beginning to understand. Best revenge does not look like revenge. It looks like a family dinner. I called Jordan the next day. He answered with, "What do you want, Dad? I'm busy." That was it. No hello, no how are you, just the exhausted sigh of a man who had been inconvenienced by his own father's existence. I kept my voice calm. "I want to collect on that dinner you sold. You said you'd have dinner with me for $1. I'm holding you to it. Saturday night, my house, 7 o'clock. Jordan laughed. "You're serious. You want me to come to Staten Island to eat your spaghetti?" "Yes," I said, "and bring your wife and your mother and Bari. I want the whole family there." There was a long pause. I could hear Jordan calculating. He was trying to figure out my angle. He assumed I had won. He was right, but not the angle he thought. "Fine," he said finally, "but I'm not staying late, and you're not going to give some speech about how I hurt your feelings. That's not what this is about." "Of course not," I said. "This is about dinner." I hung up before he could respond. Then I went into my basement and opened a safe that I had installed behind the water heater 20 years ago. Inside was a single folder. Inside the folder was a promissory note from Danny O'Brien, dated 1984, witnessed by a notary who had died in 1991. The note said that Danny owed me $50,000 plus any and all future equity realized from investments made possible by this loan. Danny had insisted on that language. He said it was only fair. I thought he was being dramatic. He was being prophetic. Saturday came. I spent the whole day cooking, sauce from scratch, meatballs the size of fists, braciole, a lasagna that took 4 hours. I do not cook to impress people. I cook because my mother cooked and her mother cooked, and the kitchen is the only place in my house where I feel like I am speaking a language everyone understands. At 6:30, I changed into the blue suit. Funeral suit. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror, 69 years old, gray hair, a face that had seen too much and said too little. I straightened my tie, and I thought about what I was going to do. They arrived at 7:15, 15 minutes late. Jordan walked in first with his wife, Lena. Lena is a good person. I do not know how she ended up with Jordan. She brought a bottle of wine that cost more than my weekly grocery budget and hugged me like she meant it. Then Denise and Bari. Denise looked around my house with the expression of someone who had just realized she used to be married to poverty. Bari shook my hand and immediately started talking about his golf game. And then Jordan closed the door and said, "Okay, Dad, here we are. You got your dinner. Can we eat now? Some of us have places to be." I smiled. I gestured to the dining room table. I had set it with my mother's good china, the one with the little flowers on the edge. I had not used it since she died. "Sit," I said. "Eat, enjoy, there's plenty." Dinner was awkward. Denise talked about her book club. Bari talked about his new car. Lena tried to include me in the conversation, asking about my garden, my neighbors, anything. Jordan stared at his phone under the table. I watched him. I watched his thumbs move across the screen. I watched him ignore the food I had spent all day making. And I felt something I had not felt in a long time. Not anger, not sadness. Certainty. The quiet kind that comes when you finally stop hoping for someone to be different and accept exactly who they are. After dessert, I cleared the plates. I poured coffee, and then I sat down at the head of the table and folded my hands. "Jordan," I said, "do you remember what you said at the gala about me being a boring retired truck dispatcher who thinks 2 pickles is fine dining?" Jordan looked up from his phone. He had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable. "Dad, that was a joke." It was a charity auction. Everyone was joking. "Were they?" I asked, because I didn't hear anyone else auctioning off their mother for $1, just their father. Denise shifted in her seat. Bari stopped talking about his golf game. Lena put her hand on Jordan's arm. Jordan pulled away. "Look," Jordan said, "if this is about the money, I'll write you a check for $1,000, okay? You can take a nice trip, go see the Grand Canyon or whatever." He pulled out his wallet. He took out a black credit card. He put it on the table like he was dropping a microphone. "How much do you want, Dad? Name your price. I'll pay you to stop making me feel guilty." I looked at the credit card, then I looked at my son, and I said the quietest words I have ever spoken. "Jordan, I don't want your money. I want you to know that I funded Daniel O'Brien's startup in 1984. $50,000. He turned it into $200 million. And before he died, he gave me a 15% equity stake in a fund managed by his partner, Marcus Thorne. That fund is now worth $800 million. My share is $120 million, and I did not take a dime of it until tonight, until this dinner, until you tried to pay me off with a credit card like I was a parking ticket." The silence that followed was not normal silence. It was the kind of silence that happens when everyone in the room stops breathing at the same time. Jordan's face changed. It did not go pale, it did not turn red. It went empty, like someone had deleted his operating system and left just the hardware. "You're lying," he whispered. "You're a retired dispatcher. You live in this house. You drive a Honda." I reached into my jacket pocket. I pulled out the folder. I slid it across the table. Jordan opened it. He saw the promissory note. He saw the letter from Marcus Thorne confirming the equity transfer. He saw the bank statement from an account in my name with a balance that had more commas than a grammar textbook. He looked up at me. His eyes were wet. "You let me auction you off for $1," he said. "You stood there while I made you a joke. You let everyone laugh at you." I nodded. "Yes, I did, because I wanted you to show everyone who you really are, and you did. You showed them. You showed Marcus. You showed the whole room. And now Marcus knows exactly what kind of man you are, which means every person in your industry is going to know within a week, because Marcus Thorne does not keep secrets. He just waits for the right moment to share them." Jordan stood up so fast his chair fell backward. "You ruined me," he said. His voice was shaking. "I'm going to lose my partnership, my reputation, everything." I stayed seated. I took a sip of my coffee. It was cold. I drank it anyway. "No, Jordan. You ruined yourself. I just provided the audience." Denise started crying. Barry looked at his phone, probably checking his stock portfolio. Lena sat very still. She looked at me with an expression I could not read, and then she did something unexpected. She stood up. She walked around the table. She kissed me on the cheek. "Thank you," she whispered. "Now I know why he is the way he is, and now I know I don't have to stay." She left. The front door closed softly behind her. Jordan stood in the middle of my dining room, surrounded by my mother's china, wearing a suit that cost more than my first car, and he looked like a little boy who had just realized his father was never the problem. He was. That was 6 months ago. Jordan did not lose his partnership. He quit before they could fire him. Lena filed for divorce. Barry stopped returning Denise's calls. The dentist found a newer model. Denise moved into a condo in Florida and sends me a Christmas card every year with a picture of her cat. I do not respond. Marcus Thorne and I had dinner last week at a restaurant where the waiter called me sir and meant it. I still live in my house in Staten Island. The porch still sags, the gutters still whistle, but I hired someone to fix the water heater, not because it was broken, because I wanted to move the safe. Behind the water heater was a good hiding spot for 20 years. But some things are not meant to stay hidden forever. Some things are meant to be placed on the dining room table in front of the good china at the exact moment when everyone at the table needs to see them. Here is the twist you probably did not see coming. Marcus Thorne did not just happen to be at that gala. I met Marcus 6 months before the auction, at a diner on 23rd Street, the same diner where we had coffee after the gala. He had found me through the property records. He had contacted me. He had offered me the equity, and I had said no. I told him I did not want the money. I told him I was too old to care about wealth. And then Marcus said something that changed my mind. "Vincent," he said, "this isn't about money. This is about what your son did to you. I saw the way he talked about you at a charity event last year. I was there. You didn't see me, but I saw you standing by the window, wearing a blue suit that didn't fit. And I watched your son humiliate you in front of 500 people. I want to help you, not because you need help, because he needs to learn." I asked Marcus what he proposed. He said, "Let me bid on the dinner next year. Let me make a scene, and then let me sit at your table while you hand your son the folder." I agreed, but I added one condition. I wanted Marcus to pretend he had never met me before the gala. I wanted Jordan to believe that the billionaire was a stranger who had taken pity on his pathetic father. I wanted the humiliation to be complete. Marcus laughed when I told him that. He said, "Vincent, you are the most dangerous man I have ever met." I told him no. I'm just a retired truck dispatcher from Staten Island who learned that patience is not the absence of action. It is the deliberate delay of it. If you enjoyed this story, you are officially a revenge addict. Hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel, and remember, the next time someone underestimates you, do not correct them. Let them keep talking, let them keep digging. And when they have finished building their own grave, hand them the shovel. I'm Vincent. This has been Revenge Addict. See you next time.